the thing about rural and small town organizing is that a lot of times there's a lot of good-natured people who want to do the right thing, who are hearing only one perspective. And so it's figuring out ways to open up conversations. A lot of times even the framing of issues coming out of urban-based areas aren't always effective either. And so we use phrases like human dignity and democracy a lot. We have this tool called the Democracy Grid that takes the definition of democracy from the World Book Encyclopedia. Very neutral source, right? No one can say the World Book Encyclopedia has like a hidden agenda that we're trying to move. And so we take issues like ballot measures, and we do ballot measure forums where we talk about that ballot measure. We have a dialogue that walks through the 4 pieces of the way the World Book Encyclopedia describes democracy: majority rule, minority rights, well-informed and educated, reasonable standard of living, and I can never remember the 4th one, even though I've been doing this for 10 years. And that actually opens up conversation in a really different way. It gets people saying, wait, ballot measure 9, do we really want to write into our Constitution second-class citizenship status? So I might not think I know any LGBTQ people or fully get it, but I can get the notion that, wait, you're right. Would I treat my next door neighbor this way, or do I believe we should write this into our Constitution? And that opens up the conversation really differently. And so I think that the thing about working in communities where people have only been hearing from the right and the organizing has only come from the right, and that's the radio waves and et cetera, is that there are people who just are good-hearted people. And so it's having the conversation a little bit differently. It's opening it up differently. It's using different framing that actually kind of builds on people's core values of good and neighborly. I mean, we use neighbor to neighbor for 20 years, neighbor to neighbor conversations, kitchen table conversations, democracy, human dignity. Those frames bring people into the room and start from a shared place of consensus. No one's going to be oh, I hate human dignity. Down with human dignity. It just doesn't happen that way. And so being able to start from those places allows for the conversation to happen in a really different way. And so that's been, our experience. And then when we're working with groups and they're hosting events and things like that, we have this thing that we call bright lights. You look for people who you could just see their face change, or that grab you after, or that people are clearly even in an even stronger place of puzzling some of this through, and then building a relationship. Our work is so deeply engaged. I actually think this gets to the LGBTQ organizing. Is there something there? I think the relationship-based stuff is really true too. It's who are you, being in really deep relationship with people. So when we do our organizing, we find these bright lights and we realize, oh, that forum moment was helpful, but actually if I stay with that person, because we don't do hotels when we go on the road, if I stay with that person the next time I come to this town, the best conversations are going to happen over the really nice dinner that they make for me when I come to town, and when we start to unpack it even further. So I think that it's really about starting from a place of consensus, not the lowest common denominator. That actually drives me crazy when everyone says, well, let's find the one thing that we can all agree on, and then we'll just ignore all this other stuff. But instead, it's about starting from a shared place of consensus and agreement, and then deepening the relationship with people and building up. And so that's been my experience, is that there is opportunity. And I might tell one quick little story that's really interesting and intense. In one community where we were working with folks around saving their rural post office, we met this woman who started a militia in that town. And she started a militia because the local law enforcement had been so cut in their county that they had several robberies and things like that happen. But no law enforcement would come. And we all have really strong, I think, feelings about law enforcement and all that. But so she's in this place, in this community. We're okay, there's all these break-ins, these things have happened. We haven't seen a police officer for months and months in our community. Well, what do? Well, we start a militia, because that's the resources she had. And we met her and we started doing work around the post office with her and other people. And now they have a group that is a local human dignity group that's a member of ROP that she runs. So the difference, like if the KKK came to town, she probably could have like gone that way a little bit, right? You know, with the idea of a militia. But actually, when given the opportunity to engage in conversation about some of this stuff, she was totally like, yeah, we need a human dignity group to make sure, you know. So it was really, it's a very profound example, but an example of, you know, when people have the space and opportunity and tools to think through things and have different resources. I think sometimes when we're in urban settings, we kind of take that for granted, we forget, but there's literally towns that never have no community radio stations, have no alternative paper, have no alternative media, have no progressive group in town. And so to never, ever, ever hear that other perspective and then have the opportunity to talk about it actually can walk down a very different road. So.